ghostly apparitions, UFOs, aliens, and mysterious creatures lurking in hidden depths around us. These are the mysteries which baffle, yet pique our curiosity. Will we ever prove their existence? Welcome to Paranormal Experienced Radio. Listen as your host and seasoned researcher Kat Hobson discovers new evidence, bringing us closer to the truth with informative guest interviews, the latest paranormal news, investigation advice, and equipment tips. Kat is the lead investigator with SCARE, located in Birmingham, Alabama, and feels that her gifts were given to aid individuals in distress in what should be their safe environments. Now here is your host of Paranormal Experienced Radio, Kat Hobson, on Let's Talk Radio.
Hello there. Welcome to Paranormal Experienced Radio. I am your host, Kat Hobson, and I am just thrilled to be here tonight with my guest, and we are going to introduce him in a moment. I have got to give a shout out to the Ozark Mountain UFO Conference. That was one of the best experiences I've had, and the Ozark Mountain Publishing, who puts that on, did it with very few staff and a lot of volunteers, and they worked so hard and so well. It was seamless. We had all kinds of speakers. We had people from the science side, the history side of ufology. We had people from experiencers, one of whom was giving her very first sharing of her abduction experiences that started when she was 12, and she was brilliant. We had my friend Chase discussing the elongated skulls. Richard Dolan was very cool. I enjoyed him greatly, and it was just a really neat thing. I'd never seen him present either. We had humor. Mark D'Antonio was channeling Robin Williams apparently during his presentation. It was brilliant. And it was just a fantastic weekend. Linda Moulton Howe was there, and her discussion was just brilliant. She probably scared a little people because, she does get to reality, and it is what it is. And she tells it like it is. Grant Cameron was someone new to me. I just, I'm going to leave someone out if I try to go through everyone. And everyone is worthy of a full discussion about them. And we'll get to that on a later show. But right now, I just have to welcome someone who is near and dear to my heart. He has been a friend of mine and a friend of my show since I started. He was one of my first guests and has been a frequent one. When we first met, he had just written The Para-Investigators, Supernaturally Gifted Investigators. He's gone on to 2 other books. In the past year, he has been hitting it hot and hard. He is working with George Norrie. He was interviewed by him not only on his show, but also on Beyond Belief. He has been interviewed by everyone, and I know that because I've watched most of those interviews. So, I'm going to just introduce you to my friend, the original X-Men. Started as a G-Man. Pretty good guy. John DeSouza. Hi, John.
Hey, Kat. Great to be here with you again with your great audience. I'm so happy to be with you, be able to spend some time with you talking about these topics that are so important, and to just, be covering these topics that we really need to bring to light as much as possible.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I have enjoyed the ufology experiences that I've had. But this one that I just left this weekend was very special. And I think that you would have, with your information, blown them away because you're such a great speaker. So, and I know that you are going to be doing Contact in the Desert in June, and you have all kinds of other stuff lined up too. But I think it's going to be cool for you.
Yes. Oh, thanks so much, Kat. For those of your listeners who may not know, my name is John DeSouza. I was a special agent of the FBI for about 25 years. During that time, I maintained a top secret security clearance. I worked in a lot of high-profile cases, global war on terrorism, but also I collected what I call the real-life X-Files, and I share those with people in my books today. But mainly, one thing I'm really interested in is, Kat, the conference that you just went to. You were with some of the great names that I also will be spending time with very soon, like Linda Moulton Howe and many others. Was there any talk about this, the Atacama 6-inch alien, desert alien that was that just had the reports come back on it, the genetic testing? Did anybody talk about that?
There was private discussion. I did not see that in any public forum.
Okay. Yeah, because I need to talk about that tonight, and I have quite a bit to say about it. Because I just want to tell people I am not a scientist. I am an investigator. That is all I am. I'm an investigator. I'm an attorney. I've spent many years in federal courts as an expert witness, as a special agent of the FBI, as a prosecutorial assistant. I deal with evidence. I deal with proof, I should say, and that's what I am primarily. That's all I am. I'm not a scientist. I can do research, but that's not my primary function. I am an investigator. What investigators do is that we seek out truth, and we seek out and we give investigative conclusions on things, whether they are actually true, whether the guy is guilty, whether he's not. And that's all they are. They're just conclusions that can be accepted or not accepted by the people that we bring those conclusions to. And that is really the most appropriate role to be functioning in the paranormal and in the alternative community. Because I'm here to tell you that scientists and science are not going to get us to the truth in this area, not even close. And if that's never been more clearly demonstrated than with the Atacama 6-inch alien creature that was that just had the genetic testing come back on it very recently. And people really need to look into this, because it is the most brazen, arrogant slap in the face to anyone that is seeking truth in these areas. And really even to the mainstream of people who barely pay attention to these types of things. It's a slap in the face to them, because it was the most brazen scientific, I would not say fraud, but I would say the most brazen scientific just fantasy that they have perpetrated on us that I have ever seen. And
that's strong for you. You do not often come out that.
Yeah. And the thing is, and I can't say fraud or that they lied, because they didn't. They did all the genetic testing very correctly and truthfully, and all the testing was done completely correctly. And I would ask people to look up the 6-inch, the Atacama Desert 6-inch alien, and just look up pictures as I talk about this, and people will be astounded at the findings that were made. This was something that was found, not found, but it was originally in the possession of Dr. Stephen Greer,
right?
Who may be a scientist, but not really. I mean, he is an alternative thinker. He is an alternative person, even though technically he still technically is a scientist by education. But he is a person who is actually a real investigator. He actually sought the truth on this, and he was guaranteed by the Stanford Science Department that they would pursue the truth on this 6-inch figure that came out of the Atacama Desert. And he was promised that they would get to the truth on this. And he was given their preliminary findings, which anybody can look up. They're actually quoted. The head of the science department, I forget, I don't have his name in front of me, but it's probably better that way. Right. Because anybody can look up his actual quotes. He's on camera with Dr. Greer giving him the preliminary findings on the Atacama 6-inch desert alien figure that was found. And the preliminary findings were, this is definitely not a fetus, a human fetus. Mm-hmm. This is definitely not a group of mutations, because the group of mutations would have to be an incredible constellation of many mutations that have never been seen before. And you can't form a hypothesis on something that you've seen one time. That's unique, in other words. So you'd have to have seen just 10 ribs instead of 12 a couple of times before in order to say, oh, there it is again, 10 ribs on this thing instead of 12, the norm, or whatever the human number of ribs are. We've seen this type of shaped head before a couple of times in mutations, and now we can say, okay, here it is again. So now we can do a hypothesis that this could be, because that's the way science really works. You have to see it once or twice if you're going to say that this happened here. You have to see it. But this was a constellation of like 20 different non-human mutations, all in the same body, mm-hmm. including the extraordinary size of 6 inches. Right. And that's why the preliminary findings that you can find on YouTube, you can find the head scientist saying this to Dr. Greer. He's quoted on YouTube. You can see him saying, it would have to be like lightning striking in the same spot 15 or 20 times. That would be the chances of all these mutations being in a human creature. It's just not possible at all. As Dr. Greer said, it would not pass the laugh test. Right. And yet, after a certain amount of time, this science department and the head scientist of this science department at Stanford University, really, he double-crossed Dr. Greer, and he double-crossed all of us, because he came up with a conclusion that was not in the least supported by any of the genetic testing that he just did, and that he showed. All the genetic testing didn't show anything that was in his conclusion, because his final conclusion was, oh, well, we can see that this is actually a human fetus. It is not a non-human species. It is a human fetus that has this enormous group of mutations that all occurred in the same body. And then he reported that as his final conclusion. And then the headlines were carried by all these, and then mainstream news did their part of the job, right? Which was the headlines from CNN: "Mystery of the alien skeleton solved. It's just a human fetus." And then who else? Smithsonian Magazine reports researchers solved the mystery of the Atacama alien mummy. It's human after all. And all these, and people just don't know the power that this mainstream media has. How many? New York Times reported their headline was a tiny mummy in the Atacama an alien? No. But the real story is, it's just a human fetus. And there's dozens and dozens and dozens of these headlines, these fake news headlines that were immediately sent out as soon as the Stanford conclusion, not the testing. They very carefully ignore referring to the testing in every one of these stories. That's the amazing part. And why is that? That's because the testing showed almost 10% of the genetic material was not human, was non-human. 10% is an enormous.
That is an enormous percentage.
That's an enormous percentage, because all people, and you don't have to be a scientist to understand this. That's one of the problems that Dr. Greer, I see Dr. Greer has when he's trying to explain this to people, is that because he gets into the technical language and he starts to lose people, he starts to lose me, because I can't follow a lot of the deep scientific technical jargon that he'll go into. But I can explain it to people so simply in a thumbnail. And all it is that a chimpanzee, which is a different species from human, only has 1% of its genetic material is different from ours. Just 1%. That means 99% of its genetic material is the same as human. So now
that's astounding.
That's the real number for other species. 1% differentiation in genetic structure from us. So now compare that to this Atacama Desert 6-inch mummy that was found. It has over 9% difference in its, and yet, so the conclusion that Stanford University Science Department put out is completely not supported by that. It's not supported at all. And yet, because of that, all the mainstream news, and we're talking really more than dozens, we're talking about hundreds of mainstream news sources across the globe all picked up the conclusion that was reported, but not the testing. They didn't say a word about the testing. And they very carefully avoided that for that reason, for what I'm saying right now. And people...
I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
This is just, in the way that I put it, you have to use imagery to make people understand. And this is like mainstream scientists spitting on us and telling us it's raining. That's what this is, because it is absolutely, absolutely outrageous. It is absolutely outrageous, because what Stanford really showed us is that this figure, and I hope people are looking at pictures of what I'm talking about right now, because all you need is your common sense and your own eyes. You don't even have to touch the thing like Dr. Greer did. You could just use your common sense and your eyes. So look at this thing. Because there's lots of pictures of this thing.
Yes, there are. There's YouTube's. You can go anywhere and find this information.
Yes, exactly. And your common sense and your own eyes can tell you. You don't need to be a trained investigator. We used to say in the FBI, you don't need to be a trained investigator to know when somebody's dropping a bowling ball on your head. And you don't need to be a trained investigator. You can just see this with your own eyes and your common sense. And you can see that this is not a human fetus. Mutated is not at all, because it's got hardened teeth, it's got hardened bones. You can see that. You can see it because you can see it with your eyes, and it is a grown up figure of life. It is absolutely, and the bones are all fused. It can't be a fetus. It can't be. The bones are the joints, the skull. Everything is fused. This thing,
well, if that were to be a human fetus, that is completely. I'm going to use the word, for everything to already be fused. That would have to be impossible.
Exactly.
If it were fetal. If it were fetal.
Exactly, but that's the only way they can justify the size of 6 inches is to say that it's some sort of a fetus. So that's why they did. That's why they did that.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a minute, because we are picking up connections left and right, and I want them to know that there is some fantastic conversation happening in chat. If you would like to go there, it is letstalkradio.net. And when you hit the page, you will see to your right the live chat options at the bottom. They're very bright. One's orange, one's green. And just hit in there. You can log in with your Facebook. You can log in multiple ways, or you can come in as a mystery guest, and that's okay too. And we actually have a photo of this in chat now. Yeah. So, I wanted to ask you, because I know we're coming up. We're about 2 minutes from our break. But when we start talking about this is actually a perfectly formed little, based on descriptions from eyewitnesses, with the structure, the sockets, and everything else, it looks like a little baby alien.
Yeah.
Or a little tiny alien.
Right. It appears to be, to me, it looks like an adult of whatever it is.
It's
an
fully
adult
formed.
Creature. Yes, because it's fully formed. The joints are all fused. The skull is completely fused. It looks like it's an adult of whatever it is. But one thing I know it's not is it's not human. That is not human. Basically, the real truth that Sanford Science Department revealed to us is that this thing is not a doll. It is not a fraud put together by some con men who are looking to make a quick buck.
Well, I'm going to tell you that we are on our break. I am so sorry to interrupt you because we're going to continue this discussion, and I'm going to tell you what else it's not what they said. But we will be back on the flip side of this. See ya in 3 minutes with John DeSouza and his fantastic information.
In a world of many voices, there's just one that needs to be heard. Yours. Join the conversation at letstalkradio.net. It's safe to say that we are not alone in the universe. Most of us believe in the existence of intelligent life elsewhere, but where are they? With over 19 years of extensive research, author, investigator, and ufologist Tom Conwell can only provide one answer. They are here. A series of books like no other that contains compelling evidence of UFOs on the East Coast. Volume 1 in the central United States. Volume 2 and the Western U.S. Volume 3. Not only has Tom written about these sightings in his book series, but also painstakingly documented each report on a one-of-a-kind UFO sighting map of the entire United States. Could the eyewitness reports of thousands of people be wrong? Read Tom Conwell's They Are Here series and decide for yourself. They have eluded us. They have traveled far. They are here. Order your proof today at theyarehere-conwell.com. That's theyarehere-conwell.com. Coming soon with your support. Preacher 6 is a small-town preacher that is summoned to the big city where he ends up fighting evil in a literal sense. The characters that he meets along the journey are something special and unique. They could all have their own films made about them. If you like original content that is driven by action and amazing writing, you must support the film Preacher 6. No remakes, redos, sequels, or do-overs for us. Let's take film back. If you like Quentin Tarantino type films, then you will love Preacher 6. Preacher 6 is like Taxi Driver meets Sin City meets The Prophecy. So please be a part of something awesome. Sometimes darkness just needs a few well-placed bullets. Preacher 6. Support this new film at Indiegogo.com and search Preacher 6. That's Indiegogo.com, Preacher 6. Support it and let's take film back.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has delivered a one-of-a-kind reading experience, covering everything from psychics, UFOs, paranormal investigations, and more. To subscribe, visit fatemag.com or call 828-702-3032. That's 828-702-3032. Subscribe and find your true reports of the strange and unknown at fatemag.com.
When it absolutely, positively has to be the best. WGOG DB Clearwater. Let's talk.
Three minutes after the hour, and we are back with my guest, John DeSouza, here on Paranormal Experienced Radio. John, I know that this is just such an affront to the entire ufology community. And I can only imagine Dr. Greer's feelings as he is trying to cope with this, with having a colleague and friend basically just outright lie to the public, not to him, but to the public. And I can't imagine when you've put that much of your life into doing this, what that must feel like. And what do you think is the cause of that? Why do you think that it was so imperative that he just turn his back on the truth as he reported from his research to Stephen Greer and go public with something completely different?
Yeah, I wouldn't say, because I'm an attorney and I try to be very careful about when you say that someone is lying. I wouldn't say he lied. What I would say is that the head of the Stanford Science Department simply pretended he was doing science because he did all the genetic testing. I don't know how long that must have taken, like a year probably or longer, to do the mapping and all that. And he did all that properly. I wouldn't say he lied. What he did was he simply gave a bunch of conclusions based on nothing.
So he altered the conclusions that would have been based on evidence and went with something just completely random.
Basically, he it looks like he just sat there and just got the conclusions from what the New York Times wanted and CNN wanted, and he just copied that down, and that's what he did, which to my mind, it's even worse than lying, because he's pretending to be a scientist. He's pretending this is a scientific process. And meanwhile, he really turned his back on the scientific process. And that's what really created this unbelievable. And also, it was an unbelievable betrayal to Dr. Stephen Greer, who trusted him and trusted the Stanford Science Department to really get to the truth of this matter. And and this is part of my mantra also. I always tell people, scientists are never going to get you to the truth on any paranormal topics. It's just never going to happen. Why? Because you're talking about endangering their grants, endangering their endowments. Stanford Science Department has significant endowments. That is enormous amounts of money. You're talking about endangering their tenure in their scientific positions that they have. They're not going to do that. They're not going to sacrifice that sort of thing. And also, there's a lot of incentives for them. There's a lot of incentives for them to play ball with what mainstream powers want them to find. The head of the Stanford Science Department, very shortly after he gave these conclusions to the New York Times and CNN and everyone else across the mainstream news, very shortly after that, he actually got an award from, hold on, wait for this, the Department of Defense of the United States of America.
Well, who's shocked by that?
Now, why is a scientist getting awards from the DOD, Department of Defense? That is right after he came up with these conclusions and put them out. It's very, as an investigator, you are taught to look at clues and patterns even across long periods of time, different patterns of behavior among similar actors. And there was something very similar that just occurred a short time ago with this sort of thing, with the Nazca mummies.
Mm-hmm.
The Nazca mummies that were tested out of Peru, that were tested by Gaia TV. And it was a very similar pattern of behavior. And it was almost identical, actually. And, that's another thing that we could talk about, but this was not as brazen. It was not as arrogant as what just happened with the Atacama 6-inch alien. But it was very bad also, because Gaia TV actually brought the Nazca mummies over, which were clearly non-human. They were creatures with, again, the elongated skulls and 3 fingers and 3 toes on each.
And no suture.
Foot. Right, and no suture, so that basically the only thing that the labs told us was that these were not composed creatures. These were not statues that had been frauded together. They were actual, formerly living creatures. And then they basically gave the same conclusions, that there was a portion of the DNA testing that was non-human, a percentage. A lot of the labs just said, oh, the DNA is too degraded, because Gaia actually used a dozen labs as a safeguard in case one of the labs chickened out and didn't want to lose their license.
Well, that's what happened to Chase, is that she went to 3 labs. She was working with L.A. Marzulli, and out of those 3 labs, all of them had an agreement to allow their names to be out there and the scientists that were involved, so that you could have the evidence trail. And at the end of the day, 2 of them said, nope, none of that's going to happen, and you can't even use our name.
That's right.
And so only 1 allowed them to do that. So
right,
there's a lot of this.
But the one that did allow them to use their name, what was their conclusions on the material they were given?
Human.
Yeah, but where was the creatures from that they provided, that L.A. Marzulli provided? It was Paracas.
They were from
skulls, right?
They were from Europe and the Middle and Near East, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And they were pre-Columbian.
Right.
So there was no way they should have been able to be there.
Right. And also it was the elongated skulls creatures,
yes,
which had to have, I'm sure that if you look at the actual testing, there had to be a percentage that was non-human of the genetic structure. Even on that one, I'm quite sure that there was. But the problem is that it gets reported as being just fully human, like it's 100% human. And I'm sure if you look at the actual testing, that's not the case. That's why
I am going to ask Chase about that when I talk to her.
Yeah, but you have to actually look at the actual testing, because that's how they pull this con on us over and over again with the scientific laboratories. They simply just say, okay, well, it was 98% human. But like I said, a chimpanzee is only 99% human DNA. So 2% deviation, that's an enormous number right there.
That's huge, yeah.
But they will not report that. And why won't they report that deviation? Is because they don't want to lose their licenses. They're a laboratory. They need to have that license renewed.
They also need funding.
Exactly.
They need funding as well.
Yes, and they're going to lose both if they report that this was a non-human genetic structure on this creature. That's the problem. That's why scientists are never going to get you to the truth. Laboratories are never going to get you to the truth. What you need is investigators. It's the only way that you can get to the truth.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that while I have been an investigator of the paranormal for some time, the average person does not have the investigation training that someone like you, who was actually an active agent for 25 years, would have. When you have someone who is going into this, how would you suggest they best educate themselves to be a better investigator for the average person, not somebody who's already in law enforcement?
Yeah, that's why I'm developing my program, which is basically the X Vault, which is just basically teaching simple methodologies in investigation. Things I always talk about, like mapping the person, mapping a whistleblower, mapping the persona of the whistleblower, then cussing information and what that means, and what little lessons in things that can be used by people. The 5 S's of coming upon the scene, first responder, what they have to do, seal, separate, sample, survey, statements. These little mini lessons that I want to develop, and I am developing for people to be able to just put into practice the difference between a preliminary investigation, a major case, little things that help to the usage of subject association charts, so that when you have a piece of data, you can actually map where did they come from, who used this, why did they use it, and what's the purposes of it. People just have to just take these lessons from investigators on how to actually pierce through information, because the difference is law enforcement people are trained to operate in an atmosphere that is trying to hide the truth from them. That's the crucial difference between a scientific thinker and an investigator, because scientific thinkers are just applying their worldview to grind out a material conclusion in the material milieu. That's all they're doing, and that's all they'll ever do. But investigators have to follow clues and patterns no matter where they lead, even if they lead to a paranormal metaphysical conclusion. Always. That's why we need investigators in these areas to be the final arbiters of these areas, not scientists, because it's just not going to happen.
I have a question relevant to that.
Yeah.
People have been trying for so long, various people from all walks of anomalous research have been trying for decades, if not centuries, to find and have in hand proof positive that the anomalous results of their investigation held up. I had mentioned, Chase, you wrote the book,
yes,
about the investigation and documentation. There's so many things, and now people have been led into the mindset that, well, it's going to be the science that proves it. We're going to have to go with science. We have to have the science. Follow the evidence, follow the science. Science won't lie. I think Stephen Greer would probably argue about whether science will lie or not, even though that's not appropriate, and I'm not accusing any individual of lying, but at some point they did. Someone did, to have come to such an abrupt turnabout when, telling others that the evidence was steering to one thing, and then all of a sudden not even sharing that evidence when they share a conclusion apparently drawn without the evidence. So Is it wrong for people who are very serious and dedicated about their work to try to achieve a scientific level of evidentiary review to say, yes, this is this? Because you're saying that's not going to happen.
It's never.
Or should they just shrug and say, well, I know this is the case. If you will look at this, you will know this is the case. How are they supposed to be able to take their information public and not be, mocked? What is that? I actually have a quote of yours that I just love, which is ridiculed in public, but consulted in private.
Yeah, that was my story in the FBI.
Yes.
My fellow FBI agents who would ridicule me in public, but then, in private moments, they would sidle up to me and tell me their own paranormal story and consult with me on that sort of thing. But yeah, I can
got
see.
The book.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, the first one, Para Investigators. But yeah, I'll tell you exactly what should have been done, and I think Dr. Greer would agree with this. Somebody who's a great investigator. I know that Dr. Greer is supposedly a scientist. He may not be happy with that label anymore after this, but Dr. Greer is actually an investigator. He really is. And the only way, and now he knows he should have done this. He should have held the Atacama 6-inch alien figure in his hand He should have kept it. He should not have handed it over to some mainstream science lab at some mainstream facility. And he should have done his own lab work on it. Regardless of how hard that would have been or how long it would have taken, he should have gotten his own lab, a lab that would have been directly under his supervision, under the supervision of a real investigator. And he should have held on to it and only had done, and he should not have trusted an outside mainstream science figure to do that testing for him. That was the mistake that he made. That's the mistake that we all make every time with these non-human mummies, these non-human creatures that we sample. You hand that over to a mainstream lab or a mainstream science department, you're not going to get the truth back. That's what we're seeing, and that's what we have seen in this last incident so brazenly, so arrogantly, that we need a rebellion against the thinking that the scientific paradigm is going to get us there as far as the truth goes, because it is not happening. And we need to have, if you must have a scientific process, then go ahead and have a scientific process, but don't leave it to the scientific paradigm, to the scientific mainstream paradigm. And you got to have these labs have to be owned under investigators that are going to own the results, have the results in their hands and under their supervision so that they can dictate the conclusions when they come out. That's the only way it can work.
Let me ask you a question, because I know that we're coming up to a break shortly. We're probably about maybe even 3 minutes away, so we'll probably have to address this. And we have a question for you when we come back also. But when did Stephen Greer hand over in total this artifact, or did he allow them to gather samples while he was supervising and take it back with him? Does he still have this?
Well, it doesn't really matter, because he has access to, guess what, other 6-inch Atacama alien creatures. I'm sorry, not necessarily Atacama, but other diminutive alien creatures that are being volunteered to him from other people all around the world. Because guess what? It appears these non-human species have been inhabiting many parts of the world. Mainstream science is going to have a hard time carrying out their orders to cover this up because Dr. Greer does have access to several other of these creatures from all around the world in mummified form. And they also, guess what, are non-human, and they have features that you can just look at them and keep your common sense, and you can see that these are not human creatures, because that's what Stanford Science Department really revealed to us. And what they really revealed to us is that we are not alone. Forget about the universe, but right here on our planet Earth, we are not alone. There are other non-human, humanoid species that are sharing our planet right now. And that's what they really told us. That's what they really revealed with their genetic testing, if you put aside their fake conclusions that they pasted on there. Right.
Well, question
what
about if he's, did they actually confiscate and take his sample?
I'm sure he still has his samples of the creature, but yeah, he still does have his samples. I'm sure of that. But he also has others that are going to be coming in. And they did sit down with him and do the preliminary testing, which basically revealed all the realities of the creature, of the specimen of the Atacama Desert 6-inch alien. Revealed that it was non-human, that it had non-human percentage of its DNA, was nearly 9%, 10%. and that it was not a fetus, that it was not human, and that because it had hardened teeth, hardened bones, fused skeletal structures. And so all the preliminary testing that they sat and they did with him showed the reality of what was going on. But then part of their trick is to say, well, we're gonna take this now into the lab and do the super deep, profound DNA testing and pairing and all that. And so that's going to take a year. So what that does is that it takes it out of the public consciousness. Right. No matter how shocked the public was by those pictures originally, it takes it out of the public consciousness so that when the scientific labs come back with their ridiculous conclusions, the public just doesn't care. And it's just like there's no outcry. Right. Because they forgot about it anyway. And then they just say, oh, yeah, okay, I guess, yeah, a human fetus with mutations. Yeah, I guess that could be right. And it just goes away.
Just bizarre. And with that, we are up against our station break. And we'll be back on the flip side with one of the questions from chat. And again, with John DeSouza. See you on the flip side.
In 2012, Keith Linder, after successfully obtaining a management position at a prestige healthcare company, decides the time is right for him and his girlfriend to move in together. That's putting things lightly. Weird things begin to happen within days of moving into the modern suburban home. The horrors they witnessed and desperately tried to fight off would end up putting them at the odds with members of the paranormal community and themselves. This gripping story, told from the house occupant's point of view, not only lists tales, but also includes pictures, video reenactments, commentary, and audio of the events being reported. Author Keith Linder does not ask you to believe him. He only asks you to listen. The Bothell Hell House by Keith Linder, now available on Amazon. The book, The Bothell Hell House. The author, Keith Linder. Order yours today on Amazon. Terry Lovelace is a 64-year-old retired lawyer and former assistant attorney general. The earliest alien experience Terry can recall was when he was 8 years old. Incident at Devil's Den. In May of 1963, he saw a UFO and described it as a perfect silver disc. 3 years later, on a clear night, he saw a second flying disc outside his second-story bedroom window. Incident at Devil's Den. In 1975, while serving as a medic in the Air Force, he witnessed yet another UFO hovering 50 feet over an ICBM missile silo. Incident at Devil's Den. 2 years later, while he and a friend were camped in an isolated state park known as Devil's Den, Terry had a life-changing fourth encounter. Not only did Terry and a friend witness an estimated 5-story high UFO, but this fourth encounter would be an epic, life-altering event. Incident at Devil's Den by Terry Lovelace. Digital download or paperback now available on Amazon. Let'sTalkRadio.net.
47 minutes after the hour, and you are back on Paranormal Experienced. I am Kat Hobson, your host, with my guest, John DeSouza. John, we have a question for you from chat, and it's from Greg, who is one of my buddies. He's the host of Paranormal Nights and a co-founder of the Supernatural and Paranormal University. He reads a lot, too. He said that they had recently seen the announcements from NASA about astronaut Scott Kelly returning from his year-long mission and indications that his DNA had changed or mutated. His theory is, that possibly our ancestors may have left Earth and their descendants lived in space and so have changed exponentially given the times and are returning to us in different forms, maybe similar to what you're describing about this creature. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I could believe that could be very possible, and there is a possibility that we may be the alien visitors that we're looking for, and that's always been a possibility. I've been studying I've been studying the incident with in New Mexico with the police officer who had the incident in 1964, and it was really amazing. This police officer who was just doing his job, and in 1964, and he was just on some desert town highway, and he just saw this UFO land in the distance behind a mound, and he went over to check it out, and there was an explosion of some sort, and there were big indentations in the ground that indicated a vehicle of like maybe 20,000 pounds. And then he saw two figures that appeared small figures that quickly got into the UFO and took off. And this was a guy who was very trusted police officer, and people believed that he was absolutely truthful in everything that he said. And so it was, what was his name? His name is escaping me right now. But he was a New Mexico police officer, and a lot of the indications of that incident, the Zamora incident, that's it. His name, the officer's name was Zamora.
Right.
But the indications from that particular incident in 1964, it just looks a lot like it was some kind of human vehicle, because of the conventional things. Like he seemed to see a lot of thrust coming out of the vehicle.
Right.
There was some kind of conventional explosion that when the thing landed over in the mound, Lonnie Zamora, that was it, the Lonnie Zamora incident. And it just seemed, and the indentations from a very heavy vehicle in the desert that was found by investigators later. And there was also some scorched earth, like from like regular, like jet exhaust kind of thing. Or what you would think is jet exhaust.
Right.
And so, that particular incident, and yet what he did see, small figures, he said. They could have been human, they could have not, because they were very far away when he came over the mountain, came over the hill, the ridge. And so as I study that incident, it just looks more and more like that was some kind of human-generated incident. And perhaps those diminutive little creatures that he saw may have been humans. And I don't know whether that's maybe was an experimental vehicle, something that was created by the military-industrial complex, or if that was something from the future. I don't know. But it seems not to fit the pattern of extraterrestrial vehicles that tend to be anti-gravity, tend to work based on anti-gravity and so forth. So, but yeah, overall, the person that asked the question in chat, I would say, yeah, it's very possible that that some of these UFOs are ourselves, whether from the future or from some other avenue. But I would caution him to not listen to anything that NASA says on the topic, because pretty much everything they say has proven in the past to be fiction or deceptive in some way.
Which is sad because of their job.
Exactly.
I know what their real job is, which is disinformation to a large extent. But, you would think that people who participate with that program would be the most enthusiastic on getting and sharing information. And it seems that the ones that I have spoken with who are part of NASA and who are part of various space programs kind of have to hide their interest if they talk to someone like me, right? It has to be off the record. They aren't comfortable talking to me in front of people.
Oh, yeah. And they better hide it.
They had better hide it. And it's just, it's pretty sad, really.
There's been a couple of whistleblowers that have come out of NASA that their entire job, all they ever did was sit at these satellite satellite pictures
Consoles.
and erase structures from on the moon, on Mars, and just that's all they did was just erase structures so that they wouldn't be seen, and retouching photos so that people wouldn't be seeing these structures on the moon and on Mars. That was their entire job.
That gets so difficult though, because then you wind up getting he said, she said, these people are full of malarkey, those people are crazy. These people are going to take me off to jail because I'm violating my contract. Mm-hmm. It just is, and that's a reality, people. That is truly a reality. If they are violating a clearance, then they're out and they are disciplined.
Absolutely. And that's the way it would go down.
And, it's just sad because they know it's there. They know it's there. And yet they can't come out and say, no, really, listen to me, because they're going to be in trouble. It must make them crazy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's got to be difficult to live with, but it's the way our mainstream society has been for so long, covering these things up, deceiving everyone. And the other problem is everybody's in on it. So mainstream news, mainstream sources, the scientific community, and NASA. So it's like it's not that hard because it's just a way of life for them to do these things and to cover these things up. So they're used to it.
I know, but it still gets pretty frustrating. And just as a side note, on Fate Radio Friday night, Todd Bates is going to be discussing the lunar landing hoax with guest Scott Henderson. So you can catch that here Friday night. But I was actually just reading about that today, which is, things are so full of synchronicity, right? But
yeah. Absolutely. And the powers that be are working overtime to delegitimize people who are in positions of trust, like Lonnie Zamora, who try to tell people what really happened, bring facts forward. And here's another thing that I wanted to say, and I wanted to say it to Dr. Greer and to many other scientists out there who try to actually cut through this system of fraud and fakery. And I want to tell them this: you cannot fight fake science with real science. No. It's not going to work. Dr. Greer thinks that, okay, they came up with a false conclusion based on nothing. In other words, they basically disobeyed the entire scientific paradigm in order to put out these fake conclusions on the 6-inch Atacama desert alien, 6-inch alien. And so they basically disregarded everything in the scientific community in order to put out these fake conclusions. Dr. Greer, because he's still a scientist, he believes, well, he can tell the truth and show it scientifically so that people will say, oh, okay, that's what really happened. It doesn't work that way, because when you're committed to the scientific paradigm, then you have to play their game. You've already lost. Right. Because they have all the resources and all the people willing to give false conclusions, to misdirect people. And if you think real science is going to solve the problem, it's not. It's not, because it exists under the same paradigm of grants and endowments and peer review process and all the things that are used to keep scientists under control of the mainstream authorities and keep them obedient and cranking out, and laboratories, and keep them cranking out the conclusions that the powers that be want.
Absolutely. It's so funny because I have said this so many times that Orson Welles' radio program of War of the Worlds was a trial run, and we failed. So I think that when you consider the population now, the density, and people going nuts and just losing it.
Yeah. Well,
today that would be so much worse.
And so let me tell you on the other side.
And we only have a minute, so go fast.
Oh, okay.
Or do you want to bring it back?
Yeah, I'll have to bring it back then. Just as far as, just to remind me, War of the Worlds, I'll tell you.
Yes. But I'll tell you that you could have knocked me over with a feather when I said that to Linda Moulton Howe, and she repeated it later. I was just like, oh, she liked that. I thought I was right, too. So we are just about to head on out into our 5-minute news break. This is going to be, hopefully, good news about like what a genius pilot was flying that Southwest Air flight. Thank God for her. She got them on the ground, and who would have thought, man? And a fantastic aviator. So we are thankful for those who are okay, and our prayers are with those family members who lost their loved one. But we are still so thankful that it wasn't worse. We will catch you back on the flip side of this news, and I hope you find a little good news in there tonight.
Between the U.S. and North Korea. I'm Rob Dawson, Fox News Radio. President Trump says the progress with North Korea is encouraging. In a joint news conference with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, the president says he's still preparing to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
We've never been in a position like this with that regime, whether it's father, grandfather, or son. And I hope to have a very successful meeting. If we don't think it's going to be successful, Mark, we won't have it.
CIA Director and Secretary of State nominee Mike Pompeo met with Kim earlier this month. The NTSB says the Southwest Airlines plane involved in yesterday's accident tilted sharply when the plane's engine failed at around 30,000 feet. Chairman Robert Sumwalt says everyone on board would have noticed when it happened.
Throughout the rest of the flight, there was what I'm going to describe as a fair amount of vibration throughout the airframe, the airplane.
A passenger on board was partially sucked out of the plane after debris from the engine shattered one of the windows. The plane managed to make an emergency landing in Philadelphia, but one woman died. The Trump administration continues to focus on border security. Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen is in Arizona at the border and says she still wants to see the president's wall built.
Despite the steps his administration has taken to strengthen border security, we continue to see unacceptable levels of illegal drugs, dangerous gang and transnational criminal organization activity, and illegal immigration flow across our nation's border.
Director Nielsen says more resources are needed at the border. Congress has refused to fully fund the president's wall. A new mission for NASA is underway. The test spacecraft launched today to find new worlds around neighboring stars that could support life. The satellite will scan the entire sky for 2 years, looking for perhaps Earth's twin. Fox News, fair and balanced.
Are you hiring, posting your position to job sites and waiting for the right people to see it? ZipRecruiter knew there was a smarter way, so they built a platform that finds the right job candidates for you. ZipRecruiter learns what you're looking for, identifies people with the right experience, and invites them to apply to your job. These invitations have revolutionized how you find your next hire. In fact, 80% of employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site in just 1 day. And ZipRecruiter doesn't stop there. They even spotlight the strongest applications you receive so you never miss a great match. The right candidates are out there. ZipRecruiter is how you find them. Businesses of all sizes trust ZipRecruiter for their hiring needs. Right now, our listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/newscast. That's ZipRecruiter.com/newscast. ZipRecruiter.com/newscast. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
The sports world pays tribute to former First Lady Barbara Bush following news of her passing.
Houston Texans defensive lineman J.J. Watt among the first to honor Mrs. Bush, posting photos with her on social media along with the message, "Rest in peace, Mrs. Barbara Bush. You are a beautiful light in this world, and I am forever thankful for your friendship." Mrs. Bush, a noted baseball fan who enjoyed attending Houston Astros games and even keeping track of the action on a scorecard. She accompanied her husband, former President George Bush, to Johnny Manziel's pro day at Texas A&M back in 2014, 19, and the pair handled the pregame coin toss at Super Bowl 51 last year. Barbara Bush was 92 years old. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
The funeral for the former First Lady will be held on Saturday. Several ex-presidents and First Lady Melania Trump are expected to attend. The White House hasn't said yet if President Trump will be there. Sportsmen's clubs and gun dealers sue over Vermont's new gun law.
The lawsuit arguing Vermont's limit on gun magazines to 10 rounds for long guns and 15 rounds for handguns violates the state's constitution. Vermont Federation of Sportsmen Clubs President Chris Bradley saying the high-capacity magazines are often used in competitive shooting, and he believes the lawsuit will prevail. Republican Governor Phil Scott signed a series of gun restrictions earlier this month, including raising the minimum age to buy firearms and making it easier to take guns away from people who pose a threat to themselves or others. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
Alabama Governor Kay Ivey is praising a law she signed that prohibits the removal of Confederate monuments.
I believe that it's more important that if we're going to get where we want to go, we've got to understand where we've been. And I believe the people of Alabama agree with that decision and support protecting all of our historical monuments.
Ivey was lieutenant governor when Robert J. Bentley resigned. She is campaigning to be the Republican nominee in the race for Alabama governor in November. I'm Rob Dawson, Fox News Radio.
In a world of many voices, there's just one that needs to be heard. Yours. Join the conversation at letstalkradio.net.
Minutes after the hour, and you are back with Paranormal Experienced Radio. I am your host, Kat Hobson, and I am just having a fantastic time. It is a brilliant show with a brilliant investigator. My friend John DeSouza has been bringing everything to the table. We have been discussing everything from whether or not to even trust mainstream science to try to support ufology information. No. Whether or not the information revealed relevant to the Acoma incident or creature is relevant and truthful. And while it is definitely relevant, the conclusions reached don't necessarily match the information perceived during the investigation. And it's really been something to hear as we've listened to John. He is an author. He's actually a brilliant author. He's written The Para Investigators, Supernaturally Gifted Investigators, The Extra-Dimensionals, True Tales and Concepts of Alien Visitors, and Clear Hearers. He is a strong part not only of ufology information and investigation, but also of the spiritual awakening that has been going on, I believe, throughout the world for the past several years. I think probably starting in 2014, it kicked into high gear. He has been pretty much transitioning from a 25-year FBI agent to a UFO abductee investigator. He is a regular on Coast to Coast. He has appeared on Beyond Belief with George Norrie. And he is just really having a great year. He has Contact in the Desert 2018 coming up in June. And John, welcome back.
Oh, thank you so much, Kat. Also, I have, because, they're always listening, I also have this weekend, George Norrie Live theatrical show going on April 21st at Virginia G. Piper Theater in Scottsdale, Arizona. That will be a huge event with Travis Walton and Melinda Leslie, Dr. Lynn Katai of the Phoenix Lights, and Sonia Grace and Dr. Sky. It'll be a very
what a great group of people.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be really something.
Awesome. I didn't realize that was this weekend. My apologies for not bringing that into play.
Oh no, that's good. As long as one of us says it, that's the important thing.
Well, and you know what? I do know that Coast to Coast does know what happens on this show most time, especially when one of their favorite guests is here. So definitely important information.
Yes. And, we were talking about War of the Worlds scenario, which is very important to always note here, because that was a psyop test by the elite powers in control over society to see kind of responses, to test response. It was like a beta testing of responses. And so what I want to say based on that is to just play devil's advocate a little bit, because on the Atacama desert alien 6-inch mummy, because a lot of people will say, look, they want to live in the matrix of deception, and they'll say, well, what would have been such a big deal if the lab had reported the truth on the Atacama 6-inch desert alien being actually non-human? So what? What would have been, this is a conspiracy theory, because if they had just reported the truth, it wouldn't have been that big a deal. So what? Okay, we have non-human species that have lived on Earth before. So what? And I'm here to tell them, because I'm an investigator and I notice patterns of behavior over long periods of time in similar actors. I'll tell them what the big deal would have been. It would have been War of the Worlds scenario in an extended analysis, and I'll tell you how. Because if they had, let's say by mistake, they didn't get the memorandum at the Stanford Science Department, the memorandum they were supposed to get from the elite powers in control, and by mistake they reported the truth that the genetic testing actually showed 10% deviation in genetics, and this is the first non-human, which it's not, of course, but because there's been others, but right. This is the first, let's say theoretically, this is the first non-human humanoid species found on the Earth. We are not alone, everybody. Let's say they reported the truth, actually. If they had done that, first of all, there would have been national consequences for the country where the stuff came from, which I believe was Chile. It was a desert in Chile, South America, where this stuff, where the Atacama Desert is. And what would have happened was there would have been a flood, among other psychological consequences, but there also would have been a physical consequence. There would have been a flood of discoverers, investigators, and curiosity seekers to the Atacama Desert. And they would have started poking around out there to find more of these samples, these non-human mummies of these creatures. And that would have been fine, because I'll tell you, there's a lot more of them out there. As a matter of fact, there's rumors, which is just raw data, but there are rumors that people see live samples of these creatures in the Atacama Desert all the time, and that they are very much alive. So that would have led to the next step in the problem in the War of the Worlds scenario, which would have been people would have, all these curiosity seekers would have found live 6-inch aliens out there. And then that would have gotten us into a whole nother realm, because then people would have started saying, well, if you lied to us about if there are other humanoid figures, other humanoid, non-human species, then what other non-human species are there? And there would have been a revisitation of the Paracas skulls, of the Nazca mummies in that area as well, geographically. And people would have started going all over the world trying to find non-human species, and they might have come up with some live ones. And then that gets us into a whole nother realm of awakening and people understanding that mainstream authorities have been lying to us, have been deceiving us, have been trying to make us believe that we are the only ones when we're not. And that would have led to the War of the Worlds type scenario, where there would have been a rebellion in thought, even of the mainstream population would have said, well, what else have they been lying about?
Well, let me interject something with that too, though, because you missed a big segment.
Yeah.
Religion.
Yes,
religion
you're right.
would have a whole different connotation.
You're right.
And
that would be
a big deal.
Absolutely. That would have been a major portion of this, especially discovering live samples of these other humanoid species. That would have just created a huge organized religion all over the world would have been thrown into a huge rebellion against this going forward. And these consequences are the reason why Stanford's science department and all these other labs all across the country have to report what they are reporting. Because this War of the World scenario, especially when you're going to start to get the Pope involved and other religious authorities, they are not going to want this stuff let out of the bottle, because it would be like a genie that you cannot get back in. That's the reason why we have to put up with this fake science and these fake scientific conclusions that are given to us.
Well, when you look at some of the things that have been tested and have come back and been accepted as being, okay, probably not. The percentage is, this is human. No discussion actually of the percentages. At what point does the ufology community have to face the reality of their own complicity?
Yeah, they never will. And that's exactly why ufology hasn't moved basically anywhere in the last 70 years, because the ufology community is full of scientists and former scientists who still all worship at the same altar of scientific paradigm. And because of that, they still trust that same system. And the moment which basically has become like a religious group. It's no longer a methodology. Just science is no longer a methodology for finding stuff out. That's not what it is. It is part of the mainstream establishment that has to hold up certain dogmas and certain precepts. And the main precept, of course, is materialism, that whatever mainstream authorities tell you is real is all there is. There's nothing outside of that. And they will continue always to uphold that system. That's just how they are. And ufology, unfortunately, is not much different in that sense, because the ufology community are filled with former scientists and scientific thinkers. And that's why they're not going to get anywhere with that community.
It's so exasperating, because especially when you know the intelligence of the people involved in all of this. We had talked about my friend Chase Klotsky, who actually got her results on the Peruvian elongated skulls, no sutures, all kinds of other things that were interesting. Mm-hmm. And, she is continuing on with her research. She find a way to prove this thoroughly or disprove it thoroughly.
Yeah, because Chase submitted Chase and Lynn Marzulli submitted their Paracas skulls to scientific labs, right?
Right, three of them. And only two would even let them go forward. It was just so, I know how frustrating that had to be for them. Yeah, we did say that you could use our names, but you know what? Not now. We're sorry. We're just going to back off on this.
So two of the labs, they used three, and two of the labs said, we'll do the examination, but you cannot say our names. And then just one of the labs said they could use their names, but then that one lab came back to them and told them, oh, it's human, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the thing is, when I look at one of those Paracas skulls, I keep my common sense and my two eyes to see that I can tell that's not human. It's not human. And I'll tell you the reason, because there were people who used to bind their skulls, but it's not going to increase who used to bind their skulls to make them shape that way. But it's not going to increase. It's not going to double the size of your brain and your brain case.
And these have the cranial enlargement.
Exactly.
I mean, Chase is brilliant. She is brilliant. She is not given up.
Yeah.
But she was working with a team of scientists.
Yeah. Because, that was her first mistake. You cannot work with a team of scientists. You could, like I said before to you, Kat, you could work with a lab or a science where you own the lab or you own that result. And you as the investigator, like Chase, for instance, will be in charge of what is done at that lab. Then you can work with them, or you can work with them working for you. That's the only way you're going to get an honest result. That's the only way. Otherwise, it's just, you're just tossing it into fakery. That's all you're doing. And if I look at those Paracas skulls that Chase and Lynn Marzulli had, I see that there is no human that has a brain volume that is 3 times the size of a regular brain. That mutation has not been seen before in the human species. So that right away tells me that they're just coming back with results that say, oh, it's 100% human. I know it's not true, and I don't need to be a scientist to know that. All I need to be is an investigator with common sense.
Which you are. And that being said, we are already up against a station break. I can't believe it. But we will be back on the other side, and I hope you enjoy this.
Real people and not pre-recorded and regurgitated radio. WGOG DB Clearwater. Let's talk. It's safe to say that we are not alone in the universe. Most of us believe in the existence of intelligent life elsewhere, but where are they? With over 19 years of extensive research, author, investigator, and ufologist Tom Conwell can only provide one answer. They are here. A series of books like no other that contains compelling evidence of UFOs on the East Coast. Volume 1 in the central United States. Volume 2 and the Western U.S. Volume 3. Not only has Tom written about these sightings in his book series, but also painstakingly documented each report on a one-of-a-kind UFO sighting map of the entire United States. Could the eyewitness reports of thousands of people be wrong? Read Tom Conwell's They Are Here series and decide for yourself. They have eluded us. They have traveled far. They are here. Order your proof today at theyarehere-conwell.com. That's theyarehere-conwell.com. Shopping, dining, beautiful lakes and rivers, and a monster? Welcome to Braxton County, West Virginia. Centrally located, Braxton County, West Virginia is the ideal place to visit. Natural beauty and recreation abound with 2 beautiful lakes for easy kayaking and canoeing, and many hiking trails. Did we mention the Flatwoods Monster? That's right. Visit Braxton County, West Virginia's Flatwoods Monster Museum. And not only learn about the Flatwoods Monster, but walk in the same footsteps as the people who witnessed it. Nearly all of our attractions can be found within a few miles of Interstate 79. Visit us online at braxtonwv.org. That's braxtonwv.org. Braxton County, West Virginia. Center yourself here.
We're back with Paranormal Experience Radio. I'm Kat, your host, and I am joined by my friend and just a brilliant investigator, John DeSouza. John, we have had so much going on both on the air and in chat, and we have both noticed that Terry had a fantastic comment, which was, I find it interesting how scientists reject hypotheses just because they don't know, quote, it already. Just because we don't have the information or facts in our body of knowledge, it can't be possible. It's frustrating. And I agree with that.
Absolutely, yeah. It is. It's also against science to do that. So,
yes.
Especially when you're going to get, and again, there's been many examples of this. It's not just the Atacama 6-inch alien and the Nazca mummies. It's many, and the Paracas skulls as well. It's many. There've been many other incidents of this where they follow the same script over and over again to keep us from the knowledge that there are non-human species that we share this planet with that are humanoid and appear humanoid as well. And it is extremely frustrating because here's why. In order for you to have a hypothesis like, oh, this is a mutation, this skull that is enlarged 3 times is a mutation. In order for you to say that as a scientist you have that hypothesis, okay, it's a mutation, you're supposed to have a couple of other examples of that mutation throughout history. There's been billions and billions of us. You're going to tell me you weren't able to find other mutations, because science is supposed to be about reproducible results, and if you have several examples of something, then you can have a hypothesis that it's a human mutation is what it is. But to have something just happen once or one group of times because L.A. Marzulli and Chase Klotsky brought you these mutations, and then say, well, okay, I see that these skulls are 3 times the size of a human. So based on me seeing it, this one group that was brought to me, I'm going to judge that it is a human mutation. That's not how science works. That's not how it's supposed to work. That's why that's fake science that they are using in order to keep the truth from us. It's absolutely outrageous, and it's absolutely frustrating, and it is very cowardly too.
Well, Greg said also that something is brewing, allowing former DoD members to work with a public entity like To the Stars Academy with Tom DeLonge, and where they released video of a chase of a craft by F-35 aircraft. It's another social control to something big about to happen, in his opinion. Or else, why wouldn't the DoD and HIV do as they have done for the past 60 years and to continue to deny?
Oh, no, Greg, he's absolutely right. Something very, very big is brewing. And the way that we know that is because of this massive psychological operation that's been put forward with the Tom DeLonge group. And Tom DeLonge himself, I believe, is very sincere and actually believes in all this stuff. But the group working with him, if I could put together, if you ask me, what are the agencies that the people that I would absolutely never trust to bring anything to the American public, it would be this crew of characters that are around Tom DeLonge and the To the Stars Academy. These high CIA officials, DOD officials, Secretary of Defense officials, people from NSA. Are you really going to trust these people as being these government officials as being somebody that is trying to bring some truth to the American public? I certainly wouldn't. These were the people that when I was an FBI agent, street agent, for many years, these are the people I would avoid like the plague, because they were never, ever planning or trying to do something to help the American people, ever. And so, but something big is brewing, because for them to do this mini disclosure that they did, in order to try to grab hold of the ufology subject, which is what they're trying to do. It makes me glad that they've pretty much been discredited now by the fact that they were standing in front of a Mylar balloon on December 16th.
Could you believe that?
Yeah. That's pretty funny.
Oh, my word.
Yeah, here's my Mylar balloon. Oh, and by the way, here's some stock I want to sell you if you'll buy some, will you?
You sit there, and DeLonge has even been taken to Area 51. He was given a tour of Area 51. That's astounding.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He is being given unprecedented access to what information there is. And yet now he's been given DOD officials, one of whom was in charge of the secret program. And it's just bizarre. And Kim in chat says, do other governments do the same thing? And to an extent, but they're much more open. That it's not just the U.S. The other global agencies are not necessarily keeping quiet. But this is a potential global threat. This is not just an American issue. But you will find that people in Britain has released their documents. Right. Brazil has really never hidden their documents. Mexico has really never hidden their documents. Yeah. You know, the Canadian minister came out to discuss this. Right.
But
after he left office.
Yeah, but the U.S. is always, the biggest actor in this sort of thing throughout the world.
World leader, right?
Yeah. So, but what really is brewing is that we have this To the Stars Academy appears to be some massive psychological operation, because we see even that the mainstream news has been given orders to go against their training and to consider UFOs as real serious topic for the first time in 70 years. And so that's the real tip-off, that this is the mainstream, this is the elite powers in control working here, because they gave, you saw both CNN and Fox News giving leeway and considering the To the Stars Academy as a serious thing, and looking at their videos and saying, yeah, these UFOs may be real. Well, the biggest tip-off with that group is that they had one piece of data, which is that they were trying to take control of ufology and trying to take control of the language. Mm-hmm. They were trying to change us from saying UFO to saying UAP, UAPs, the unknown aerial phenomena. But then also they pasted onto that unknown aerial threat. And so that was the big thing. And you even saw Hillary Clinton saying, going on a scripted appearance and saying, oh, no, ufology is real. And this could be an unknown aerial threat. And then you saw John Podesta saying the same thing. And then you saw Senator Harry Reid. All of these actors have something in common. And that what they had in common was that they worked for the global cabal. And they were using that language. And then we see Tom DeLonge being given that language to use as well, unknown aerial threats. Because I believe that this entire psychological operation is for the purpose of promoting unknown aerial threat and weaponization of outer space, which is going to be the biggest push that is going on right now from the elite powers in control all over the planet.
Exactly. But you know what? If you have weaponry in space, do you really want people who can go rogue having control of that to turn it back on Earth?
Well, that's exactly what they will do ultimately.
I do know that.
Yeah, and dictators.
I've been reading and researching this, and it's very bad.
We are headed towards the final fake war that humanity will have to face, and it will be the fake alien invasion, and it will be the elite powers, the global cabal, trying to power themselves with space-based weapons that will be turned on the populace, and they will be able to exert control that they've dreamed of in the past and they never had.
Well, let me ask you this. If we were put here, if there are tens of thousands of exoplanets just in our solar system, okay? And if we go to the whole Anunnaki experiencer type thing, or even just to we were seated, there's all kinds of things. We're like the Australia of the planets. They send all their criminals here, whatever. But if there really is someone, then do you think that they would intervene on the part of humanity?
I'm hoping that they are intervening even now, because I've always, in all the cases I study, all the cases that I investigate, there's always stories of negative encounters with negative alien visitors, like Betty and Barney Hill,
right.
Where they go through these horrible experiences, these abductions, and others, and many others. And then there's positive experiences as well, where people come in touch with beneficial, benevolent alien visitors who help them, who uplift them, who cure their diseases. And I've seen many of those cases also. So I'm hoping, and everybody knows that we've had these incidences like 1980, the Rendlesham Forest incident, where there was an invasion of UFOs across an American military base on British soil. And now it appears that part of the activity during those 3 days and nights that occurred in 1980 was the UFOs coming and shutting down nuclear facilities, nuclear missiles, nuclear missile facilities.
They've done that here.
And they've done that here on our soil many times. And so, there are benevolent alien visitors, apparently, who are trying to help us. And I think that goes on all the time. And that is who we need to be reaching out to even now.
Well, I do know that light workers appear to be trying to do that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's the exact right way to go, because that's what I write about. And that's the whole idea of extra dimensionals, that most alien visitors are actually not physical in nature. They are actually extra dimensional. They are coming here from other dimensions outside of our time and space. They are not traveling through the solar systems, the galaxies, and so forth. But both they and also the UFOs are traveling here from other dimensions. They change their vibration and they appear here. So they are multidimensional beings. And the trick to that is, so are we. And so, light workers would be the way to communicate, to reach out, to talk to these alien visitors. And that's what we need to pursue, instead of all being herded towards this constant space travel that is going to be the big agenda going on, because space travel is intimately connected to space weaponization. And that's what we need to turn away from, because locking ourselves in tin cans and shooting us off into space here is not going to help. It's not going to help us in that sense. A good meditation or light workers would be a better way to communicate with alien visitors.
Well, I think so too, because I was exposed to a lot of really neat and new to me ideas this week. And some of them were not so new. I've often thought that if we could just get the math worked out, then the tin cans would be obsolete. Why would we not be able just to step in? Take a step and you're there. Exactly. If you learn to manipulate time. And I don't think that's an unrealistic possibility. Everything that we can do now, from saving someone by cutting out malignancies, from being able to look inside a human using a camera and, see those malignancies, to being able to operate on an infant while it's still in a womb. All of these are impossibilities and just ludicrous ideas 30 years to 100 years ago. And it's just like, that's not a huge bit of time in the grand scheme of things. So what is going to be a possibility that we laugh at today in a week, in a year?
Exactly.
So, I've never felt like I had a handle on what aliens were like. I know I've heard the most god-awful stories about reptilians and just about every other species. I listened to a speaker this weekend who was talking about interacting with reptilians, and it was a beautiful and not scary thing that happened because they were very loving, and that the fact of the universe, the basic premise of the universe is that love fixes just about everything.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm all about 11 and stuff when there's something that scares me. Generally not. But how cool if you didn't have that fear and you were able just to face it and learn from it. And
yeah, exactly. And that's what we need to move towards with the extra-dimensional hypothesis of alien visitors, and with light workers, and with understanding the nature of these things, because the mainstream and the elite powers in control are always using their psyops and their mainstream media and mainstream news to push us in the exact opposite direction, to keep us embroiled in fear and loathing and the hostile, unknown alien threats that are going to come and get us, and they're trying to move us in that direction all the time. And so we need to move to resist that. We need to have a rebellion in thought against the mainstream authorities and their authority. We need to stop giving away our own common sense and our own ability to see these things and what they really mean. And we need to take a step back and say that we're not going to give away our common sense and our own ability to see to mainstream authorities who are going to tell us what reality is, because they've been doing that for a long time. And and this latest outrage is just with the Atakama 6-inch alien is just the latest example, because they do this all the time. And so we need to help each other to take a step back from this and to let them know that we're not going to defer to their authority anymore. That's what we really need to do.
Well, there are things that are historic in nature, and that is that people who come up against their government tend to get overrun, because people forget that there's how many millions in the United States alone versus just those few in power who try to intimidate you and make you think that you're crazy for even having a discussion on this topic.
Right.
And
we need to really just look at history and imitate the examples that have worked in the past.
Yes.
And one of the stories I always tell is, the Soviet Union was an even larger country than the United States, with bigger population and bigger land mass across 3 time zones. And what happened in the Soviet Union at the end of the 80s, towards the 90s, was you had the Dog Walkers Rebellion, which was a peaceful rebellion. And what all it was everybody was getting Pravda news throughout the entire Soviet Union. And there were newspapers. Everything was Pravda newspapers and Pravda,
which ironically meant truth.
Right. And that was official government news. And it was all, and every night at 6 o'clock across 3 time zones, Pravda News would come on in the evening news. People would used to eat their dinner and watch Pravda News. Well, everywhere in the Soviet Union, people just withdrew and they left. They stopped watching at 6 o'clock. They stopped watching Pravda News. As a matter of fact, the warehouses at the end during the fall of the Soviet Union was filled with unsold Pravda News newspapers. I mean, big fire hazards, because everyone stopped buying them. And also at 6 o'clock p.m. Throughout the Soviet Union, people started going, instead of sitting down for dinner, people went out for an hour to walk their dogs, and they started noticing each other. And this started happening with hundreds of millions of people across the Soviet Union, and they started noticing each other, and they started being able to talk to each other while they walked their dogs during the Pravda News Hour. And they would talk to each other and share information from the West, which was more likely to be true. Even a rumor from the West was more likely to be true than anything else. And they could talk to each other, and they wouldn't be bothered by the KGB because they were doing an ordinary activity, walking their dogs, even though they were congregating. So they were fine. And it was found that the fall of the Soviet Union, which I believe was in 1993, the final fall of the Soviet Union, nobody was watching Pravda News in the evening except for government officials. That's it. Nobody else was. So they had a quiet rebellion just by withdrawing themselves from the official government Pravda News all across the Soviet Union. And that really cut away the ability of the government to put out their fake information and their fake nonsense among the populace. People would just not know what somebody was talking about. Somebody said, hey, the government said this last night. The government said that people just wouldn't get anywhere. There'd be no traction. And that's what we need to recreate here now.
I think people are starting to, because I can't tell you the last time I sat through a news broadcast of any shape, form, or fashion. I have hit my saturation point. I actually hit it during our election cycle, and they're just being more and more stupid. I mean, absolutely. Everybody is. Nobody is trying to have any sort of conversation. And speaking of conversation, we're fixing to have to break ours because we're coming up against our final station break. But we will be back shortly. And Todd actually said the internet is the best thing that ever happened for research. It's just too bad a lot of it is clouded and fake. It would be a great source, and I agree. But you know what? It's not, because there's a lot of wormholes to go down. Yeah. So we'll be back in about 2 minutes, and we will see you then.
In a world of many voices, there's just one that needs to be heard. Yours. Join the conversation at letstalkradio.net. Coming soon with your support. Preacher 6 is a small-town preacher that is summoned to the big city where he ends up fighting evil in a literal sense. The characters that he meets along the journey are something special and unique. They could all have their own films made about them. If you like original content that is driven by action and amazing writing, you must support the film Preacher 6. No remakes, redos, sequels, or do-overs for us. Let's take film back. If you like Quentin Tarantino-type films, then you will love Preacher 6. Preacher 6 is like Taxi Driver meets Sin City meets The Prophecy. So please be a part of something awesome. Sometimes darkness just needs a few well-placed bullets. Preacher 6. Support this new film at Indiegogo.com and search Preacher 6. That's Indiegogo.com, Preacher 6. Support it, and let's take film back. Terry Lovelace is a 64-year-old retired lawyer and former assistant attorney general. The earliest alien experience Terry can recall was when he was 8 years old. Incident at Devil's Den. In May of 1963, he saw a UFO and described it as a perfect silver disc. 3 years later, on a clear night, he saw a second flying disc outside his second-story bedroom window. Incident at Devil's Den. In 1975, while serving as a medic in the Air Force, he witnessed yet another UFO hovering 50 feet over an ICBM missile silo. Incident at Devil's Den. 2 years later, while he and a friend were camped in an isolated state park known as Devil's Den, Terry had a life-changing fourth encounter. Not only did Terry and a friend witness an estimated 5-story high UFO, but this fourth encounter would be an epic, life-altering event. Incident at Devil's Den by Terry Lovelace. Digital download or paperback now available on Amazon.
47 minutes after the hour, and you are back with Paranormal Experienced Radio. I'm Kat, and my guest tonight has been John DeSouza. How lucky am I, right? But before we get back to John, for him to be telling us all the wonderful things he has coming up, I have a surprise for you, John.
Oh, wow, I can't wait.
You know, we have never been in the same place at the same time. We are great friends who care very much about each other.
Yes.
But you live far away, and I live way down south, and you don't get here much. However, that's about to change. Your paradigm is shifting, my friend, because I will be joining you at Contact in the Desert.
Oh, awesome.
Right? How cool is that?
That is the coolest thing I've heard all day.
And I am so excited to get a chance to just listen to you lecture and get a chance to, well, and everyone else, they'll all get fair time on the show.
Yeah, them too. Yeah, them too.
Them too. But I am just so excited to see you do your thing live.
Oh,
and I'm
awesome.
going to buy you a drink.
Oh, thank you so much.
You are so welcome.
I'm going to need it.
You're going to be perfect. That's a great event.
Yeah, Contact in the Desert it's crazy, and it's everybody in the world that's known is going to be there, and it's going to be so many famous people, and it's going to be at on June 1st to the 3rd. In Indian Wells, California. Contact in the Desert, the year of disclosure.
Right.
Yeah, and it'll be everybody there. Nick Pope, Giorgio, Linda Moulton Howe. They got Nassim. They've got David Wilcock. And they've got the great Dr. Richard Dolan, of course.
Yes,
and,
I just got to meet him this weekend. He is great.
He is absolutely great. That's why I always say the great when I say his name. And yes, it's going to be a tremendous event. And it's going to be the first event since we had this minor sort of paradigm shift. The first really massive event, Contact in the Desert, since we've had this minor sort of paradigm shift where the mainstream media has been ordered to consider ufology as something real and something to be seriously considered. And that's going to have some big consequences at this Contact in the Desert, because we're going to have a lot more mainstream media there, and that could lead to good things and to problems as well. So we'll see. We'll see.
Well, you know, I think it's going to lead to good things, because when they're in that environment, unless they're being there to do a case study, but if they're in that environment and they see the intelligence and the educational backgrounds and the lucidity of the presenters, it will be very hard to mock and point fingers at any of the people on the roster.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely, yeah. So that's going to be great seeing you there, Kat. I'm glad to.
I know. Yeah, I'm very excited. I've waited until now to tell you, because, woo!
That would be awesome. And so I just wanted to say one last thing about fake news and mainstream news in general, which I include everything that's corporate news, whether you're talking about CNN or Fox. Fox is also controlled to a large extent.
Yes, they are.
They all are, because they're corporate news, and they are owned by the same few companies. There's only six companies. Yeah, 6 corporations that own all of the methods of information dissemination across this country and across the Western Hemisphere. So, and I used to say, oh, well, at least we can trust local news. You know, local news is just about your backyard. You know, who cares? That's trustworthy. Until this, and I urge anyone to go look at this on YouTube or any other outlets, is ever since the Sinclair local news mandate. Yes. Sinclair service. Apparently, somebody collected all of these statements by news anchors all across the country. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of news anchors all across the country who all read the same script from this script service called Sinclair Local News. And these guys wrote a script for all of the anchors all over the country to read, that basically, because apparently they're reading everything from the same scripts. And this is local
verbatim.
news.
Verbatim.
Where they all read the statement, and the statement was speaking out against what? Against news on the internet. They were saying fake news is on the internet. We can't, this stuff isn't real, and it threatens our democracy. And they all read this long 2-minute statement that was speaking out against fake news. And meanwhile, they're giving us an example of what fake news really is, because they're reading a script that they've all been given.
And they were across the board. They were Fox affiliates, CBS affiliates, NBC affiliates, PBS affiliates, everybody.
And so that's the end of me trusting local news as being partially truthful. That's come to an end real quick. And I urge anybody to go see the Sinclair's local news mandate, local news statement. Just go check it out. It's incredible. If you had a tiny shred of trust. I
actually shared that. I did share that.
Good. But if anyone has a little shred of trust for local news, it'll be evaporated real fast when you look at this.
Yes, absolutely it will. So you're going to be with George this weekend and everyone else that's just too cool for school, right?
Yes, that's right. That will be at the in Scottsdale, Arizona. Yes. At the Virginia G. Piper Theater, April 21st, weekend of April 21st, and we will be there, and it'll be a great theatrical event. This is a big theater. It's a huge thing, and we do a lot of interactive stuff with the audiences, and it's a lot of fun for them. Get to do a lot of good stuff, and it's a great time. And that will be this weekend. I got Contact in the Desert, and would ask people to look for me on Gaia. I'm developing.
Oh, yes. We didn't even get into that very. I have your link on my Facebook page.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So, and it's also on the Paranormal Experienced page, so y'all can all go and find the link to go see John's content on Gaia.
Yes. Empower your evolution. And this is the disclosure you've been waiting for. These are our slogans that we use. And so, yeah, that's very important. And go on visit my page on Gaia and check it out. What you can get for 99 cents. It's pretty good. Pretty good.
Well, and not only that, your books.
Yes.
Yeah, it's johntamaBooks.com, right?
Yes. And my books are available, the Para Investigators, the Extra Dimensionals, and the Clear Hearers as well.
Yes.
Yeah, those are available on my website, John Tama Books.
And I'm going to tell everyone that if you only read, well, I can't say that, but there's great information in all of them. But I was able this weekend to provide a document to people at the UFO con I was attending because John included it in his book. And that is The Smoking Gun. Yep. It was right around the time of Roswell. Yep. Really quick, we've got like 2 minutes. What do you think of Roswell? Yeah,
I believe that I go through that very carefully in my book, The Extra Dimensionals, and I believe Roswell was a psychological operation put together by, wait for it, alien visitors and the elite powers in control in order to distribute, working together to distribute technology among the nations as well.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's Todd's answer. And I agree with you for the record. But John's document was something that I was able to share to people, and that is in the Para Investigators. So you should read his books. All three of them are fantastic.
Yeah. The Smoking Gun. Yeah, there was a report written by an FBI agent who was also a scientist who was revealing all the truth about alien visitors. And it's a public document. Anybody can get it. And I tell you the way to get it in my book. It's pretty cool.
And I have used that link more than you can imagine because I am really being drawn to this field of study. And it's something I didn't anticipate happening, but it will consume you.
Absolutely. It will,
because there's so much information.
And because there's so many things in it that are suppressed by the elite powers in control because they fear the paranormal, they fear ufology, they fear the truth getting out and anywhere in these areas because it could affect a dangerous awakening. Which is
already in process.
Yeah, but we need to widen it to the mainstream.
We do. We will. Yeah. Little baby steps. We don't have much time. Oh, and next time we're going to have to talk about AI because there was a lot of discussion of that. And I have to get your opinions. So we're going to have to do that. We're not going to be able to wait this long next time.
Yes.
You have too much information and there's too much happening right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is. And things are accelerating, and we're going to be seeing more and more things like this breaking out all over the place. But people, please don't let go. Please don't let go of this Atakama 6-inch alien thing. And please, if you can awaken one person on that and make them look at it, it would be a big help to humanity as a whole.
Yes, absolutely. And, I am so blessed to not only have you as my guest, but as a dear friend. And I appreciate your time tonight because you are a happening hot commodity right now. And I appreciate that you are just the same person you've been since I've known you. 3 years.
Oh, thank you so much, Kat. You're so wonderful. Thank you.
You are too. Like I told you over the weekend, I just love our Mutual Admiration Society. It works great. And it helps us be able to have these conversations so well because we both respect each other and each other's intelligence. And it's a wonderful thing. And that being said, we are right at the cutoff point. And John Tama Books, you can find him, JohnTamaBooks.com. You can find John DeSouza's page on Amazon.com. You can Google him. He will come up on YouTube. He's working with George Norrie this weekend and everyone else who is amazing. And you can find him on Beyond Belief, which is George Norrie's video show. He's just brilliant. Both of them are. So next week, Chad Moore and Ghost Hunt Weekends. We're back on my normal side of the paranormal. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us. Y'all are the reason we do this. Have a great week. Same cat time, same cat channel. Good night.